Welcome to the Business Leaders Legacy Podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes of business leaders to uncover their vision, strategies, and challenges they face along the way. My name is Chris Bruner. I'm the CEO of SignalVerified Solutions and the host of today's podcast. Today, I'm excited to have Michael Campbell, founder and CEO of SignalVerified. Michael is known for helping employers reduce hiring risk by replacing the guesswork with evidence, using verification systems that show how candidates actually think, solve problems, and communicate before hiring decisions are made. Leveraging his 20 plus years of global executive at Intel and Lenovo, Michael, thank you for being here. I'm excited to jump into your journey, jump into your story. If you don't mind sharing a little bit with our listeners, tell us a little bit about you, your journey, and what you do within SignalVerified.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Great to be on your show. Michael Campbell, born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, and now living in sunny San Diego. So I think you can say that I've exchanged my snow boots for beach sandals. Been here now for the past 4 years. And my professional journey has been primarily in tech. So I've done product, supply chain, operations, sales, go to market. And I've also done it not just here in the States, but also abroad. In fact, about more than a decade, I lived in Tokyo, Japan, where I learned a lot about how to get closer to customers. I learned a lot about discipline and, different cultures, the fact that different language, but the reality is people are still people. And I learned a lot about leadership in my roles, both at Intel and Lenovo. And to fast forward to today, after more than 20 years working in these large tech companies, I could have done two things. One is, go back to work for a traditional company, 9 to 5 job, or I can go and build something that matters. And I chose the latter. I thought now is a time, and it's a phenomenal time, and it always is, to own a business and run a business and have something that's yours. But I think with the amount of tools and resources that are available to you, I would say is almost like I would be remiss not to just try. And if you can combine that mindset with the idea is just figure out what is meaningful to you and important to you and identify that purposeful mission, then those two things together can be, I want to believe, unstoppable.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do is build a company that's focused, as you talked about, helping organizations, helping hiring managers make better decisions based on what people can do. We're moving to this idea of a skills economy. I don't think we're there yet, but we have to get there. And I'm trying to establish a category, call it an evidence-based platform for intelligent hiring based on proof that's focused on right now early talent. And I got to tell you that it's challenging, but because it's purposeful, because there's a mission centric behind it, it's an exciting time in my 20 plus careers to be doing this.
Yeah. No, that is awesome. It's so cool to hear how people, they just being your whole career in, tech and at these big companies and then just to have the confidence and the guts to go and start something that's impactful. And so I'd love to know more what makes you passionate about helping your clients, fix the problem of hiring risk, right? By replacing those signals with evidence-based verification. What makes you so passionate about that?
Well, the biggest thing is, um, I think if you're a hiring manager, and I can definitely relate to this, as you're building teams and bringing in talent, in many cases, it can be a guessing game. Like if you're interviewing someone and you're assessing and evaluating skills, you are trusting and believing whatever they're claiming. That is on the resume, from their references, from their interview. And that's always been the case, right? And that's why, interviews are not going to go away. They're still really important. But I think the reality is with AI, uh, you can have 2 to 3 different candidates who are different, but they might look the same on paper because of AI. And unfortunately, right, people are using AI to be efficient and effective and to um, reply and respond to roles based on what is in the requisition. So my goal is to really help organizations, help hiring managers uh, stop guessing and start verifying based on proof, based on what people can do. So, and I think if you can do that responsibly, you can hire effectively. You can hire and find that gem. You can help the unseen be seen. But most importantly, you can on ramp that talent with not speed, but with velocity. And you you have a sense of certainty that that person is going to ramp efficiently and do the job, as opposed to someone who could potentially you know um compromise culture, can slow things down and be costly to the organization. There's a lot of research on this, but the cost of a bad hire can be anywhere between 20 to 30%, if not higher. So what we're trying to do is help minimize that risk.
Yeah, no, that is so important. I feel like this is such a useful thing for so many businesses out there. So that is awesome. I'm wondering, I'm wondering if you've seen any like, trends or technologies that within the hiring, HR, talent acquisition industries that are changing how businesses, manage their operations or any trends like that.
Yeah, so I think that um, in terms of hiring trends here in the US, we are definitely moving to a skills first hiring where employers are prioritizing precision over volume. And I think that's a good thing. But unfortunately, because of AI, what happens is hiring managers tend to then just rely on what they know and who they trust, their networks, the people that are in their orbit. And when they get all these resumes, very likely they will not trust it. So they're going to rely on referrals. And that's always been the case, but I think that's becoming more the norm because there's just so much resumes for any one job. You can't go through all of them. So you just go back to what you know. But skills-based hiring is definitely a trend. And what I believe is that every company is doing it differently. There really isn't a standard that I know of just yet. You might, for example, have a skills assessment where you're testing, for example, programming or coding. You might have something that's more analog where you're giving a homework assignment to the interviewee, perhaps synchronously or asynchronously, where they work on that homework in real time or afterwards, and you assess based on that. These are all examples of a skills based hiring approach. What we're trying to do is establish a sustainable standard for skills based hiring that is trusted and unbiased, impartial. And the way to do that is you have a repeatable process that starts with really defining a project, and that project has to be uh, um, consistent with the day in life of that role. And then do is you have the interviewee work on that project. And the third step, which is the most important, is you verify the work. And what my company is trying to be is we want to be the Carfax for skills. So the verification process is done by humans, by practitioners who understand the industry, understand the work. They're the ones that will provide a designation of how that person performed on the job so that it's done without any human condition, any prejudice or bias. And we provide that insight on that candidate to the employer or the hiring manager so that he or she can make an informed decision grade backed or evidence backed decision based on that verification process. So it's
Yeah.
define, do, verify.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That is so cool to hear about. That is really exciting. I'm wondering on like on the business side of things with Signal Verified, like what are some things that are working really well right now?
Well, I would say that uh, the company is still very early innings. There are a lot of really good tailwinds, and the fact that, for example, we're talking to you, I think that's an example that people understand that there is a problem and that this is something that we need to talk about. So, thought leadership, which is really important to me personally, but also to this category, is, I would say, a tailwind. People recognize the issue. Parents, educators, hiring managers, leaders, they all get it. Um, and so that's good. The fact that we were featured recently in the San Diego Business Journal is a fantastic example of that. Uh, Recently, we just finished a partnership or a collaboration with UC San Diego's data science student organization, where we did a pilot where we tested our platform, the Signal Verified platform, where we defined a artificial project. Artificial meaning because it wasn't backed by a company. So we came in and we kind of defined the project, and the students worked on it, and we learned a lot. And this is perhaps the most important point with this pilot was that output is not that important anymore. Anyone can make a beautiful PowerPoint or a beautiful artifact. Input is more important, like the tracing documents, the writings, like your inputs, your trade-off, your assumptions, all those things that inform your final product or your output is perhaps more important because you need to really see and trace how people think. And what I learned was through that pilot is just because someone's PowerPoint or final product looks beautiful, it doesn't mean that their input was uh, thought out thoroughly. And everybody completed the project that participated, which is great, but there were variant performance between the students. The ones that performed well, they their product wasn't the most beautiful, which was a key takeaway. So, and we just published a case study about this engagement, but this is another tailwind where we have relationships with schools. I hope to do more of this, but the next step for us is getting an employer involved to help shape the project and help shape the rubric and hopefully connect students to employment through that engagement.
Yeah, no, that is so cool. That is really cool. That's awesome to hear. It's there's so much going on with I feel like this technology that's coming out and like the reach is like s- there's so much potential here. So that's like really exciting. I'm wondering, every business goes through challenges. I'm wondering if maybe you can share a past challenge that you've overcome and what you learned through that experience.
I would say the biggest challenge that we're going through, and I think maybe, most entrepreneurs know this, but um, being clear on where you're going to say no to. Saying no is perhaps just as important as saying yes. It's the founder's dilemma. Like, what customer segment are you going to prioritize and why? And be maniacal about that and don't deviate from it. You have to say no to everything else. So I made the big bet. Initially, my focus was let's go target schools, let's go target students. And after some back and forth and some introspection and discussion with advisors, decided to focus more so on companies. and just double down on that. So that's where we are right now. But always still thinking about, hey, what if we were to work with students? This last week, for example, I was honored to participate in a entrepreneurial class as a guest lecturer. And we talked about the founder's dilemma and we talked about Signal Verified. And some of the students said, this sounds like a really great product. This could give students an edge as they explore and look for opportunities for jobs. And I heard them like, oh man, maybe I should reconsider. But that's just the reality. As you go through this journey, you're going to hear, validation from another segment, but you got to stay true to where you are and don't deviate from that. So that's a challenge that I'm going through. But it just comes with the territory as a leader.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense, and that is so impactful to have, like, precision targeting on, like, what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do it is so
Right.
important, right? And so
That's right.
that is really awesome. I'm wondering, are there any, like, current challenges that you're facing, any problems, that you're currently navigating, any, like, example, like bottlenecks or anything taking up too much time or stuff like that.
Well, um, so I would probably put it in like a couple categories. One is client acquisition, uh, and just figuring out exactly what is the right lead generation strategy. I've tried different platforms. Some work, some don't work. Right now, I've gone back to the uh, you know, um, analog approach, just me reaching out to people then in my network. But I'd love to figure out, is there a way to automate this without taking the human out of the loop? It's really important to me that we stay human and we stay authentic and don't just rely on automation here. So that's a challenge. Like, what's the best approach? Within that as well is just figuring out exactly what's the right messaging that's going to resonate for my target ICP and being willing to make some tweaks to that as we go. But yeah, client acquisition is really important so that we can, drive sustainable revenue. The other challenge is product development. So, and we have a pretty strong MVP, but I've been thinking about, how do we add features to make the MVP or move into phase two? And I've been discussing this with our team, and I've decided that, you know what, let's just stay true to the MVP, keep it as is, and adding features should be a function of what customers want, rather than adding features and thinking that customers will come. Let's focus on just adding features based on what customers deem the most important. And I think that's the approach that I've taken, and we'll see what customers want. But I think it's really important to have a roadmap, discuss it with the customers, and use that as input to help shape the actual product development.
Yeah, no, and that's huge. And that kind of leads into a little bit of like thinking about like the future and what that holds. And so I wanted to ask, like, looking ahead, like, 6 months to a year from now, like, what's a goal you're focused on achieving at Signal Verified? And like, what does that like next level of growth look like?
Yeah, I would say that um, number one goal for us is in the next 6 months is to become the indisputable leader when it comes to uh, early talent hiring and intelligent hiring based on proof. We want to be known as the leader in that space. And the second thing is um, having not just, a handful of customers, but repeat customers that say, you know what, this is what we want, not only because it gives us a proof on what people can do, but because based on these talent, we know that they're going to stay in the organization and they're going to continue to grow, right? So having some data that proves that this is the best way to nurture retention or to improve your retention strategy in the organization, that's another crown jewel that I'd love to have in our cap to help enhance our value proposition to employers. We can't say that now, but I hope that we can in the future.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. That is really exciting. To to reach that next level of growth, is there like a specific plan in place, like any new staff or investments or new strategies that you have put in place to achieve that?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think number one is execution. Number one is continuing to harden the product based on client input. Number two is to um, uh, execute flawlessly on our current customers that we have and the current customers that we are working with, and getting case studies from those clients and testimonials who can say that, yes, this product has been instrumental in our hiring process, and using that as a foundation for, retention long term. So right now, because again, we're still very early, execution is so important. Saying no to things so that we are flawless on what we're doing. And as we get more proof, we will explore the possibility of getting outside investment. Right now, it's bootstrapped. I'm intentionally staying true to, you know, working with what we have and what we're doing. Uh, and once we have those proof points, then I'll seek investment from the outside because I think that's what, if I'm an investor, I want to see that. I want to see
Yeah.
those proof points. I want to see those case studies, and also helps with valuation too.
Yeah, of course, and that's huge. That's so exciting, so exciting. I think there's just like what you're doing is like amazing here, and so I'm really excited just to see where this goes and how this will impact the hiring process for so many companies because I think something like this is like very very needed, right? In
Yes.
a world where there's so much like online noise and, you
Yes.
never know what's real out there with AI
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. So it's like so impactful, so useful, exciting, So yeah, Michael, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think a lot of what you shared is like exciting. I think it's cool. I think it's really a lot of value here that you've be able to add. And I'd like to give you a moment just to share where listeners can, find Signal Verified, learn more about what you're doing, and just stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. You can learn more about Signal Verified at signalverified.net. And that's where you'll learn more about our mission and our case study, our work with UC San Diego. If you're a hiring manager and you're looking to bring in early talent in the analyst domain, please reach out. We'd love to help and support you so you hire your next gem based on proof. I'm also on the michaelcampbell.com. I love I have a site where I talk about um, this issue or this challenge when it comes to hiring. So if you're looking for someone as a speaker or keynote speaker on this topic, or if you want to do workshops, you can learn more about our programs and topics and keynote content as well on that site, themichaelcampbell.com. Or you can always reach me out by email at campbell@signalverified.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate it. To close, I'd like to ask one last question since this is the Business Leaders Legacy podcast and you being the founder and CEO of Signal Verified, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah, there's maybe two things. One is, and this is the most important, is just for my young kids. Our kids are still fairly young. I just want them to know that their dad, with, of course, in collaboration with um, their mom and my wife, uh, we are creators. We're not just consuming. We are building. And I want, if you're listening to this and maybe you're not an entrepreneur or you're working still a 9 to 5, but you have an idea, as I said at the onset, if you have an idea that's purposeful, now is a phenomenal time to build it. Don't wait, just go and create something meaningful because trust me, there's going to be a lot more companies that will come to the fold or come to fruition in the coming months and years because of all the resources that are available to us now. So be a creator, be purposeful, be mission driven. And long term, I hope that, uh, when my epitaph is written, that I'm known as someone who is exemplary or an exemplar example of purpose driven leadership working to solve a problem.
Yeah. Awesome. That is so awesome. I feel like it's so cool to hear just the impact and bringing it back to family and like the influence on kids and all that stuff. So cool. Really cool. Thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate it. To all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, share, like, follow, all that stuff. And please check out what Michael has going on at Signal Verified. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. See you guys next
Thanks,
time.
Chris. Great. Thanks for having me.